Welcome to the Uphill Athlete Podcast. Before we get started today, I want to take a moment to thank Alyssa Clark. As many of you know, for the last 3 years, Alyssa has been the face and voice of the Uphill Athlete Podcast. Alyssa is stepping away from the mic to focus on her professional running career, which has been on an incredible track lately, no pun intended. And I just want you to join me in thanking her for the warmth, the deep connections she brought to the mountain athlete community, and all of the ideas and passions she brought to the Uphill Athlete Podcast. We wish her fast splits, strong legs, and a tailwind wherever she runs. So thank you, Alyssa, and happy trails. And now you're stuck with me. My name is Steve House, and I'm the founder of Uphill Athlete. And we are going to continue to build on what the Uphill Athlete Podcast has always been, which is a source for proven training knowledge. And those of you that know me know that we'll continue to dig into the art of training and coaching for endurance sports. And we're going to go deep into all the rabbit holes around the science of how to train for trail running, mountaineering, alpinism, skiing, and all these mountain sports that we love so well. So I hope you're excited. 2026 is going to be a brand new year with a brand new evolution of the Uphill Athlete Podcast. And today's episode is, although it's December 2025, a great place to start. Scott Backus and I are going to talk about our friendship, our climbing history together, but it's really important to understand that Scott is one of these climbers who had a career, had a family. He climbed part-time as an amateur, and he did that at a very high level. We shared storms, we shared heartbreak, we shared summits. We've shared a lot of life together. And for sure, we're going to retell some of these stories and relive some of these memories, I suspect. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how Scott, through his life, managed to keep climbing a part of it, living and raising his family and having his career in the Midwest, and climbing with folks like myself and Mark Twight and many others. And I'm sure we're also going to get into that interesting, secretive, elusive path that climbing takes that always leads you back to yourself. I hope you enjoy it today. My name is Steve House, and this is the Uphill Athlete Podcast. If you're enjoying the show and want to take the next step in your training, join our newsletter and receive a free 4-week sample training plan. Head on over to uphillathletecom/letsgo, and once you sign up, you'll instantly get a link to try out some of our most popular training plans. It's a great way to get a feel for how we train our athletes for big mountain goals. Check it out at uphillathletecom/letsgo. That's uphillathletecom/letsgo. So to get us started off, Scott, tell me about the spark. What got you started with climbing? How did it find you?
So when I was in high school, the very first day of high school, we were supposed to get up and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And I didn't get up. The Nam War was going on. This would have been 1972. They hadn't ended the war yet. And I didn't get up, and neither did another classmate of mine. And everyone else did. And the teacher, who was a shop teacher, so he was, salt of the earth guy, demanded we get up and do the pledge. And we said, we're not going to do it. And they sent us down to the principal's office. And the principal, or assistant principal probably in those days, took us in the office separately, of course, not together, and tried to browbeat us into submission. And both of us said, no, we're not going to do it. You can suspend me. My parents are going to support me on this, And we became friends because of that. And then he actually quit high school after his junior year to go to college. He's a brilliant guy and is to this day, working in water filtration, and for a while was in charge of the tar sands cleanup in Canada. So that's the kind of person that he turned out to be. And so I was with a friend of mine going to a grocery store to get some munchies because I know you know this, but I was a chronic pot smoker for a bunch of parts of my life, and that was definitely one of those parts. And I saw him, and he said, we talked, and I was like, dude, it's really good to see you. Why aren't you in school? And he's like, oh, I'm at Carleton. Right. Which, oh, okay. And I don't know how it came about, but he said, hey, have you ever gone rock climbing? And I said, no. And he said, you should come rock climbing with me. And I thought we were going to go to this place in Minnesota, Taylor's Falls, and, go scramble around.
Mm-hmm.
And we got there, and he had these beautiful ropes, like, one of the early Kerr mantles that was in the country. And we went rock climbing, and it scared the hell out of me. And the first route that we did had a almost no hand section where you had to kind of step across, and I couldn't do it. And then he set up another climb that was actually harder, but it was continuous climbing, and I was able to do it. And then he was packing up to go, and I said, can I try that one again? And I could see in his face, he was like, oh, dude, I don't want to go set this up again. And I kind of, asked him again, and he relented and moved the setup back to the first climb. And I got to the same spot, and I was just as scared, but I stepped across. And I feel like I stepped into a different life. Mm-hmm. And then like a year went by with me mostly smoking pot and not getting in so much trouble, but becoming really unhappy. And then I ended up finding a group of climbers, mm-hmm. and started climbing with them. And that's all I wanted to do. And a year later, I went to Devil's Tower for the first time. And my first time there, and this would have been 78, I led a 5.9, which at the time with chalks, with hexes and tetons. Very few of you will remember those. And stoppers. That's what I had to lead this 5.9 roof, and it pushed me right to the limit, but I was able to do it without falling. And then a year later, I went to Rainier, and I remember the last 1,000 feet of elevation gain, taking like 50 steps and then just throwing myself down in the snow and having my helmet against the snow and just, but we made it.
And it's a classic Mount Rainier memory.
Right? Yeah. Got second degree sunburn on my face on the way down. Yeah. Because I was too fucked up to put on sunscreen.
Yeah.
And, but I made it. And so I was like, wow. And then a year later, this friend said, hey, Kurt and I are going to go to climb Denali. You want to come with? And that winter, he taught me how to ice climb. And I remember my tools were bamboo laminated, zero and north wall. And then I also had a pterodactyl. And the first year that I ice climbed, I soloed. And so it just felt really natural for me to do that. And these were really small ice falls. They were 35 feet tall.
Okay.
But,
And the climbing historians listening will know that a laminated bamboo shaft, Chenard equipment, probably hand forged by Yvon himself, because he probably only made, 50 or 100 of those in a year, right. Maybe.
Yeah.
And that they were also very problematic because obviously the bamboo would sometimes break, so you had to really watch that, right? I never climbed on one; I only got to.
They were actually stronger than the wooden shafted ones.
Okay, yeah, they were stronger than because the bamboo has that real fibery thing, right?
And they were damp, and so they didn't shatter.
Yeah,
they were actually they weren't recurve tools; they were curved tools, right? But
the curve pick had just been invented a few years before that, so
yes.
Let alone recurved,
right? And so they climbed beautifully. For the time,
for the time,
yeah, and they were 55 centimeters, so they were not short.
Yeah.
And then we went to Rainier. We went to Denali, and both my partners, I'm going to just say this out loud, chickened out.
Yeah.
One at 16.4 at the balcony, because we climbed the rib. We did not climb the regular route.
Yeah.
We got to the balcony, and the guy who asked me to go said he was sick. which,
Yeah.
we were all feeling the altitude, but he was afraid. And then we got to 100 feet below the plateau that leads up to the football field. And my other partner, same thing. Like, it's too late. We're taking too long. This is going too slow. And I'm like, the light's forever, dude. We got a stove. We can make this. And no. So we went down, broke my heart, and then we went back to Seattle and climbed Index and a few other places for a while. And then our deal, the three of us, was we were going to go up to the Rockies, Canadian Rockies, after that. And they were done. And so we got to Coeur d'Alene, and I literally got out of the car with a low pack and a small haul bag and hitchhiked up to Canada. Wow. And while I was up there,
what year are we in?
It was 1980.
Okay.
And so the friend of the guy who taught me how to climb, Dave Austin, the guy who I didn't stand up and say the pledge with, had another friend who was an alpinist who had been up to Alaska a few times and, had climbed almost all of the Colton Leach on the Rooster's Comb. And, he's really, really good climber.
It was cutting edge climbing at the time, for sure.
Yes. And so by accident, we met up, and he and I went and climbed the northwest of Mount Temple. So that was my first alpine climb, was to do that. But before we did that, he said he was with a woman, and he's like, I've got like 4 days, and prove to me you're really a climber. Go up and solo something. He said, how about the West Shoulder Direct on Andromeda? So I went up, and my first route in the Canadian Rockies was to solo the West Shoulder Direct on Andromeda, and that was epic at the top. Like, spent an hour and a half, 2 hours chopping through cornice to get through. And then I came back down, and he and I climbed the north face of Mount Temple by a new route, actually, the bottom half. The Dolphin was running with, raining rocks. And so we climbed rock up to where the low route comes into the Dolphin. And did some hard rock climbing pitches.
Yeah, nice.
And did an unplanned bivvy right below the overhanging Serac climbing.
Checking all the boxes of the fire of what is the word I'm looking for, Scott? The fire of not ordination, baptism.
Baptism, yeah.
Like all the baptisms. Yeah. The first open bivvy, digging through cornices. Have you fallen into a crevasse yet? You're missing that one.
No.
Oh man.
Long time for me to fall completely in a crevasse.
Yeah, it does take a while. More than
and it was actually, I'll fast forward to tell you what it is, because it's this beautiful time. Mark and I are on the descent right before we get to the 60-degree face on the west ridge of Mount Hunter.
You and Mark Twight, yep.
Yeah, and so we're cruising down, roped together, and I just disappear. And we've been on the go for like 35 hours, 40 hours at this time. And Mark said it was like, the angels came and took you. Like, you were just gone.
Just instantly.
Yeah, and just gone. And I ended up bridging the crevasse only a few feet down and was able to climb right back out. But anyway, so last thing for that Canadian trip, and this is the important piece to this. The first two were really important also, but the second was climbing the north face of Kitchener.
Mm-hmm.
And so David had to go back, and he hooked me up with a Colorado climber named John Tuckey. And John and I went to climb the north face of Kitchener, and we got up to the ice face, and it had started snowing a little bit, but all of a sudden there was spin drift and avalanches coming down. And so we ended up down climbing a crevasse way off to the side so that we could get away from the avalanches. And then we took a day or two off, and weather cleared in the beautiful Canadian Rockies way it did not in the 1980s. And we went back up and soloed from the bottom up until where the ramp pitches begin. So the first 2/3 of the route, we just climbed without rope at all. We didn't have harnesses. We had swamis. And he had a Zardski, which is, I know you know what that is, but a Zardski is a 2-man bivy sack that's coated with breather holes for each person on each side. And the bottom is open with a drawstring. So you put it over your head and pull the drawstring tight. And that was it. No stove. We had 1 liter of water each for the entire route. And I don't know what food we had, but it was like almost no food. And we were going to do it in a day. And it would have been the first time that Kitchener had gotten done in a day. And we got to within like a pitch and a half at the top, and it was pitch dark. And the last 2 pitches were quite hard. And so we spent the night out again, much colder in the snowstorm. Woke up in the morning, frozen leather, single boots, the whole thing, and climbed those last 2 pitches, and then had to Dolpher sits the one rappel into the notch on Kitchener.
Oof. A Dolpher sits. Tell me what it should. Tell me what it.
Yeah, so Dolpher
Give me a
sits is a
picture.
way to rappel where the rope literally goes over your shoulder and up through your legs, and you're using your body as friction. And
Yeah,
it was the very first way that anyone. I can't remember Dolpher's first name. I want to say Franz, but I don't think that's right. Hans Dolpher.
Hans Dolpher, yeah.
Yeah, it was the guy that invented that. So we got to do that. And I was talking with Mark about this, the last time we hung out. And I said, when I got done with that bivouac and that whole situation in Kitchener, where it pushed me past my limits for sure. Like I was so afraid on some of the pitches. The ramp route's notoriously bad pro. And if you were lucky, you'd get a sling around an icicle and a knife blade for like a whole rope length of climbing. And so we got done with that. And instead of saying, I'm never going to do this again, what I said was, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
Like
Why did you say that?
I can tell you now why I said it. It was a different reason, back then. So the reason back then was that I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. And that I felt like, superhuman after I'd done that. And the reason, today that I look at it and, my loving joke to my past is, it was a meaningful conversation with my dad. And equally as important, perhaps more important, was that my personality, my soul, required the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone needs that. And not everyone is built for that. And some people think they are and try to, and they can't. And some people that could do it never find the venue for themselves. And I feel like that's what that was about.
So, one of the things that, I heard, for example, in the podcast I did with Peter Metcalf, he talked about going up to Alaska, I think it was in 1978. And he talked a lot about how they pulled it off, like what they went through just to do the trip, right? Like, and you've talked a lot about the climbing, but what did you do to be able to spend the summer in the Canadian Rockies as a young man?
Yeah. So what I did was worked my ass off at a warehouse and lived with the parents that I didn't like, and which meant moving back home for that. And I hadn't filed taxes for 3 years. And so I filed the taxes for the 3 years, and they owed me for me at the time, an immense amount of money. And so that was my first 5-month climbing trip. Nice. So, I left in April and I came back in September. And, Devil's Tower, the Needles of South Dakota, like I said, climbing at Index, Baker, Rainier, another time on Rainier, Denali, then up to the Canadian Rockies.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Where were you the first time you met one of your climbing heroes?
oh, this is a heartbreaking one for me.
Hmm.
I was in Minneapolis, and Jeff Lowe gave a slideshow. And well, I shouldn't say that. One of my climbing heroes was my friend Dave Austin,
Okay.
and I had lost touch with him. And he was doing a slideshow at our local climbing shop, Midwest Mountaineering, about his climbing Yosemite. And he was an early valley boy. In fact, there's a picture of him in that George Myers book, Walking Slack. And he, that summer, he'd done Hall of Mirrors up to the eighth pitch, and he had done the South Seas, and he
These are
had done
hard aid routes that
hard aid route,
are
yeah,
very dangerous and don't get climbed very often.
right, and then had done the sixth ascent of the Shield, and something else. I can't remember what it was, but I remember going to that slideshow, and this would have been '78. Going to that slideshow and just being like, I couldn't believe it. Like I couldn't believe those pictures from El Capitan.
Mm-hmm.
And Hall of Mirrors, like being, 8 pitches up and looking up a slab with absolutely no holds. It's 5'11 or 5'12 rock climbing with the potential of a 100-foot fall.
In 1978.
Yeah.
When the top of the climbing grade is 512.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, it was mind blowing, I'll just say, for me.
Yeah.
And gave me something to aspire to. And then after that summer of '80, Jeff Lowe came to give a slideshow, and I tried to talk to him afterwards, and he was having none of it, and completely dismissed me. And I just remember feeling crushed that he wasn't at all friendly, and that he didn't want to hear about the fact that I soloed one of the routes, because he was the first one that climbed the West Shoulder Direct, and he had done it on site solo.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to have that connection, and he wasn't having any of it. So that was hard.
That is one of the great things about climbing, is you do feel that connection with the pioneers when you do these routes. I've also soloed the West Shoulder Direct on, and I didn't go through the cornice though. I did the huge traverse.
Oh yeah, right.
But nevertheless, one of the reasons I did it is because it's like a Jeff Lowe route, right?
Yeah.
That was what it's like, ode to the master. Like, let's go follow in his footsteps and commune with the master. And that's part of climbing.
Ramp route was also his.
And the ramp route in Kitchener was also his. That's right.
Yeah.
And that had been just a couple of years before. Was it 75 or 78 or something? He climbed that route. So, these were some of the hardest alpine routes in the world at that time. And Jeff was doing them, and you were repeating them just a few years later, and he didn't have the time of day for you.
Right.
And could I just say, Jeff, please forgive me, wherever rest in peace. That tracks.
Yeah.
I think Jeff became very kind and gentle and open in his later years, but when he was younger, he was that is his reputation. That is how people experienced him. So for better or worse.
And so and good lesson for me. I what I really wanted as a climber in terms of notoriety was the 40 people in the world. Yeah. And I didn't really care what anyone else thought. I thought for a while I did, probably till 82 or something like that. I cared what other people thought and would try and, talk to, people about that stuff. But after I actually started getting good at it, I really just wanted to be part of the cadre. And
how do you engineer that living in Minneapolis? Did you move west like so many other climbers, or?
No. I ended up, there's only those few places. And so you end up slowly running into those people in those few places. And, the
places were?
The Yosemite. Right. So, I got to hang out with Backer and Kauk and Ed Berry and Urian and Dimitri Barton, and a bunch of those guys, right?
Stone Masters.
And I was not into them.
Mm-hmm.
They were like a locker room group to me. Like there was a hierarchy, and it wasn't very free. It was kind of the opposite of free at that time, and so that sort of bummed me out. But then the Rockies, different story. Winter climbing and alpine climbing. I ran into Barry early on, and Peter Erbeck, and Ward Robinson, and then some Americans too. That I met up there. Michael Gilbert, my friend Michael Gilbert, I met up there,
Yeah,
and
a mutual friend, I should say.
yeah. And so it's like those few places that have that kind of really cool climbing. You end up meeting your those people, because that's where we congregate. And then same with Europe, like where I met Mark in Europe in 1989, and but I still, by living where I do and by climbing the way I do, I never was part of the cadre in terms of being friends with a larger group until I was part of the North Face team in '95.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just, for those listeners that aren't familiar, say that Mark is Mark Twight, Barry is Barry Blanchard, and they both, Barry has been on this podcast. Mark hopefully will be shortly. And a lot of these names like Peter Arbeck, Ward Robinson, I mean, unless you're a real historian of alpinism, you're not going to know those guys. Kevin Doyle probably would have been another one in that.
Yeah,
in that
Kevin,
group,
right?
But like these guys were, cutting edge of, they were close to the top of the sport at that time. Granted, the sport was only 2,000 people or whatever it was worldwide at that time, but nevertheless, these routes that they established in the 70s and 80s were are still hard. The ramp route is still hard. Like the west shoulder didn't get any less steep or any less treacherous, or and the rocks don't fall any less quickly when the sun hits the upper face. So you got those things all still exist. Gravity still, science always wins. Gravity is still the same. So those guys were real pioneers and doing things with equipment that is completely different than the equipment now and all the other things. So we have to pay homage to them. So I still don't get and I think, well, let me just ask you this. Do you remember the first time we met? I'll put you on the spot.
At the gathering, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you remember the first time we were in Canmore together?
Was the first time we were in Canmore together when we did M16?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. That was 1999. And one of the things that I was a regular up there at throughout that era. I was there 2-3 months out of every year.
Yeah.
And then I was climbing with Barry a lot, and some of the other, Joe Josephson, and just whoever would rope up with me basically. And then you show up and we go off and do one of the hardest routes in the range. And everybody's like, who is this? Who is this guy? And you've been, you're on the North Face team, with all, the other professional climbers of that era, but you never quite fit that mold. And you never really, I would say, and I don't know if you hesitated to step into that, I'm Scott Backies and, I'm a badass alpinist, or if you really didn't identify with that in yourself and you wanted to keep something, because at that time you also had two young kids. You were at that time, what were you, 44, I think?
42 when we did the
M16 route.
43 when we did the Slovak.
Okay. So, by contrast, I was 28.
Yeah.
So
right.
Very different eras of life. And, the other, who else was on the team that time? Well, I mean, it was probably largely at that time on the North Face team, people the same generation as you are. It was, Kitty Calhoun at that time.
I can go through and tell you. It was Lynn Hill. It was Lisa Gennady.
Jay Smith.
It was Jay Smith. It was Greg Child. It was Alex Lowe. It was Conrad Anker, Jay Smith, Steve Gerberding.
Yep, Steve.
And for those who don't know who Steve Gerberding is, he would have easily got the record for El Cap routes, which he shares with Hans, but he didn't care, whereas Hans did.
Right.
And Steve had this whole deal of doing the hardest routes in El Cap in a continuous push. Yeah. Not always 24 hours, but always in a continuous push. He and Scott Stowe and I'm sorry, I can't remember the other guy's name, but the three of them would go up on these routes that would take people, like someone like me would take 12 days. Someone that was good at it would take 5 or 6, and they would climb it in 18, 20, 24, 32 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was an amazing guy that was even more reticent than me. Yeah. And I guess what I'll say about that is that's what I was trying to say when all I really wanted to have was the respect of the 20.
Mm.
And that it felt to me like this isn't exactly superstition, but it felt like it would be pushing my luck to become noted.
Or to oversell yourself.
Yeah, right. And so for me, like the whole deal of like, I wanted your respect. I wanted Mark Wilford's respect. I wanted Pete Metcalf's respect. I wanted Mark's respect. I wanted Barry's respect. I wanted JoJo's respect. And I had it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have the
100%.
respect of all those people and some of the French alpinists because of what Mark and I had, those new routes that we had done. The people, the 20 to 40 people in the world, not everyone liked me because I wasn't always that likable. But they knew who I was and they knew what I did.
But when you say you're not likable, that's also what makes you likable, because you're a guy that says what he thinks.
Yeah.
And that's rare, even to, maybe even more so today, but still make the connection between this guy from Minneapolis and climbing with Gerberding, who lived in Yosemite, worked all year in Yosemite as a mountain guide in Yosemite, like knew the ins and outs of Yosemite like the back of his, better than the back of his hand, probably. Greg Child, who would climb, all kinds of new routes in the Karakoram, Alex Lowe, who was just this superhero figure for all of us. And they were all one thing they all had in common is they were all put themselves in the place where the thing was happening all the time.
Right.
Mark Twight, another example. Mark moved himself to Chamonix. It's like, that's where I got to be if I want to do this at the highest level. You never did that. Connect that for me, or explain. Like, I want to dig into
sure.
that.
I went out to the Yosemite and was going to move out there and become see if I could get on the rescue squad. And then I found that the whole thing was this top-down, very locker room feel to me, with Backer being at the top. Sometimes Kauk, him, and it was before they were arguing. And then there was a hierarchy. And if you, if they caught you hangdogging on something, they would surround you in Camp 4 and jeer at you. And I really hated that. Mm-hmm. And then I went to move out to Boulder, and I had friends out there. And so I would, I climbed out there a lot. Back in the early 80s, 82 and 83 and 84, I climbed all of the 511s. So all of the really scary ones: Jules Verne, Naked Edge, XM to Outer Space, Love -0, like a bunch of these routes that were calling cards. And then I'm also like one of the few people that can say that they let all the 10 pins in the needles in one day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a strong rock climber. People don't know me as that because I, come from Minnesota, and that was never my focus. I just loved doing it, and part of how I got strong for the mountains. But so I went out there, and I was hanging out, and I went to this party, and Skip Guerin and Bob Horan were there, and this guy that I was staying with, Clean Dan, who ran a window cleaning business, like the first of the rappel down, clean your windows guys, right? which is a thing now, right?
Mhm.
That's actually OSHA, rules for doing that, right? So,
Wow.
But back then it was,
Yeah.
you know,
Just a
um,
guy with a rope
yeah. And
configuring
so,
it.
and there were climbers, so they knew how to
Yeah.
do it, right? So
Yeah.
no one ever got hurt, but, it was, bizarre. And he introduced me to Skip and Bob, and uh, Dan said, "Yeah, these guys have been really crushing. They've been really, climbing a lot of hard routes for their first couple times here." And I remember Skip kind of looked at me, and maybe he was nicer, and he's like, "Oh, really cool." And Bob said, "What routes?" And Clean Dan, I didn't even say anything. Clean Dan said, "Oh, they did Jules Verne and T2 and X and Outer Space, and they climbed Love Binds Zero and the Naked Edge." And Bob looked at me and then looked away and looked at Clean Dan and said, "Oh, the old 511s." And then he turned and walked away. And I was like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
Like, I have a really nice climbing community in Minneapolis. And I know what I have to do to keep up with you or Mark, which is impossible nearly, but as close as I can with the engine that I have. And I know, and I spend 5 months a year traveling, climbing. And I
Mhm.
I did that for 20, 25 years.
Mhm.
And I love the arts in Minneapolis. Like, I'm a music guy, and we have one of the best venues in the world for music, which is First Avenue. And I also like art, and there's tons of art, there's tons of dance, and there's really great museums here. And I know that, seems weird, like people that don't know me may seem that, believe that it's impossible that would be a thing for me, but that's a huge thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I know that.
and you don't have that in Boulder, and
Yeah.
you certainly don't have that in Merced. And
You do now with Red Rocks maybe, but it's
yeah,
maybe bigger acts. It's not like
it is bigger acts. It's not like what,
it's not like what you have in Minneapolis on
right?
First Avenue there, where
Yeah,
you're seeing like my calling card to this is always that I went to, as college in Olympia, Washington,
right.
and I saw Nirvana years before they
Yeah,
published
yeah,
an album, and playing in somebody's apartment at a college party, right? Like, so I get that. I mean, they were terrible. They were obviously weren't as, I don't know if you can ever use the word polished with their sound, but they weren't tight the way
yeah.
they became later, of course. But it was like they 2 years later they were on this big breakouts hit, but. And I just got to say, last night I booked tickets to see The Cure. They're playing outside of Vienna next summer.
Right. So I saw them 3 times at First Avenue.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
that little venue. And I saw
amazing.
U2 there for their very first concert tour. They were too young to be in the bar after they did their set because one of them wasn't even 18.
Yeah,
And so they had to clear out. They got to walk in, do the show, and then they had to clear out because they
you're out the
weren't
back door.
even. Yeah, right. Literally, because
Yeah,
the one guy, I think the drummer was 17 still. So,
that's so great.
right.
That's so great. Oh.
Yeah. And I'll also say that I know both you and Mark, I always felt like my training was chaos, and to you guys it was. But I'm one of the first people that I know that was a climber that got a pulse monitor, like chest strap,
Yeah,
and learned about it.
yeah.
And I never had a notebook, and I've never written down any of my training. But I also knew that there were these minimums that I needed to be able to go into the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. Like I ran with a pulse monitor, and would go out for 4-hour runs with a Camelback so that I could get LSD, so that I could teach my body to eat its fat. And so I did all these weird things, and I had all these like Mesner. I had all these stone walls in Minneapolis that I would traverse.
Uh-huh.
And some of them were long. Some of them were 600 feet.
Yeah.
And, and hard. Like, the easiest way that you could do it would be 510.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and so.
Zone 2 training for the fingertips.
Yeah. And the other thing that I did was after Kitchener, I came home and I'm pretty self-reflective. I think you know that about me. And I was like, what happened? And I'm like, I got away with it. I got away with it on uh, Temple. I got away with it on the West Shoulder Direct, and I got away with it on Kitchener especially. And so, what do I need? And so, the very next year, I went to Yosemite and spent 4 months and climbed El Cap twice and Half Dome by the Direct. That was my first route in the Yosemite. Was Direct on Half Dome with my friend Dave Austin. Then he left, and then I spent the next month and a half free climbing, and didn't quite get a bunch of the 11s, but got all of the 10 C's and D's, and then was able to do Hall of Mirrors up to the 8th pitch, so 511D, 12A, whatever it was, because I was a good face climber, and the cracks took me a little bit longer. And so then the next winter, I went up with this friend of mine who was God rest his soul, who's an alcoholic, but he was a good ice climber. And we spent a month up in the Canadian Rockies, and we were only indoors 2 nights. So you could stay at the cook shelters in those days for free in the winter. And we climbed, Whiteman's, we climbed Pilsner Pillar, we climbed the beer walls. We were down in climbed Expert's Choice and Lineman Waterfall, and then
Weeping Wall, I'm sure.
Well, the final thing was the Weeping Wall, but I'd already climbed that in 1980, the winter of 81, barely with a friend of mine. But this time we got to the base, and my friend was really hungover, and it was kind of warm, and his glasses were fogging up, and he's like, "I'm fucking not climbing it. This is shit. I'm not doing it." And so in the winter of 82, 83, or 80, 82, 83, I soloed the Weeping Wall, which I don't know if it,
I don't know if that had been done by that time, and that's pretty early.
Maybe,
on Laughlin, maybe?
Maybe someone had done it, but
yeah,
I did.
Yeah. I've done that. It's scary.
Yeah.
Even with modern tools, it's like,
right.
Yeah, it's just, it's a little scary.
It's big.
Yeah, you're way off the ground.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is that I knew that I needed to have these skills so that a single pitch wouldn't ever defeat me. I didn't mind if the gods came and, kicked us down the mountain. That wasn't, I knew that was just the way it was. The alpinism, there's stuff that you're not in charge of, and, getting stormed off a mountain or conditioned off a mountain or whatever, to me feels really acceptable, like part of the game. But to be the guy up on the lead, not being able to do the lead, that wasn't acceptable to me. And so I got those skills so that when I went back to the mountains, that stuff couldn't defeat me.
Well, it's not just that. You still owe me a slipstream. Total blank stare. No? Remember going up to the base of slipstream?
Well, yeah, with my bad feet from M16. You do. I not slipstream. I owe you a triple crown.
Triple crown.
That's what we were doing.
Oh, that's true. We were doing the triple crown.
Yeah, which did get done. Bruno and Rollo. Yeah. But I know we would have done it if my feet weren't fucked.
Yeah.
And
that was a big season.
Yeah,
we were good. We were good to be done.
Yeah, you remember me standing on ropes and knife blades to get across to the drip?
Yeah. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. That was
that ice had come down at 5 feet or sooner.
Yep.
We would have climbed that day.
Yeah, we would have.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So that was the deal. My deal was that I really never wanted to be the guy who turned us back because I wasn't good enough.
You always used to talk about how your favorite gods were the Greek gods. I always loved that. We got a lot of laughs out of that. I tell my kids that now.
Yeah.
I'm teaching them that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really is, the way that I, joked about it, but the capriciousness of the universe,
Yeah.
and, how it's fun for me. It was fun for me then, and it still is to, imagine them up there like, oh, look at the humorous here. Man, these are perfect guys to fuck with. And they're not going to get it either. They're going to like keep banging their heads against it. So this is even better sport.
Yeah. Let's throw a storm down on them, or a lightning bolt, and
yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, for me, that comes to the head. Like the best way that ever came about was the north face of Alberta. I went in there 3 times before I finally climbed it. And the first time I went in, we got in and it was the weather was perfect, and my partner, by the time we got in, had succumbed to a viral infection of some kind and was, puking and right. And then he got better, and the weather still stayed, and we went up and got up to the low bivvy, and he's like, "I'm too weak. We can't do this." So we rappelled down that face. Oof. And then had to climb out of the hole, which it's really terrible. And then we went in the next winter, and second we got in there, it stormed for like literally a week. And, we had to ski out, and halfway out, one of my bindings pulled out of my ski, and I had to 1-foot it like halfway,
Yeah, the gods were laughing at you.
They were laughing.
Yeah.
And then the third time we got up on the face and really did the crux pitch. I led the crux pitch, and then Bill led the pitch afterwards. The one that Barry talks about, having the brand new Koflax and the 510 face climb, and Bill did that after I'd done the A3 knife blade reverse.
Explain the brand new Koflax.
Yeah, so the Koflax were so terrible for rock climbing, unless they were brand new, because they were stiff as boards. And so
stiff as a steel girder.
As a steel girder, and there was no rubber rander on them, so the plastic would slide off everything. So like if you tipped your foot in just a little bit, it would pop right off the hole. But this section on Alberta had these like diamond-shaped edges where the limestone had broken off into these perfect little flat tops. And, because the Koflax were brand new, you could just stand on them. Like they were.
Yeah, to have that 90-degree edge on the rubber, though, because if it was rounded off, there was no chance.
You were done.
Yeah.
You were absolutely done. So, and so Bill led that, and we got up to that bivvy, and it started raining on us. And we're like, oh, fuck. And then, lightning storm, we lowered our rack and our cookware 100 feet below us. It was like that bad, bees in the helmet.
Yeah.
And got up in the morning, we're ready to retreat. Sun comes out, gets beautiful. Climb all the way to the last bivvy, because it was, we couldn't even start until 1 or maybe 11 we started. So we only got like a half a day of climbing. Same thing the next night. We're really high now. Terrible thunderstorm comes in. Even more afraid that night of the lightning strikes. And, they're just like lightning strike, thunder, like 1 second. And we're like, this is going to be a terrible retreat because we're up really high right now. And, this is going to be awful. Woke up, sun comes out, dries the face out, we summit. And then while we're on the way down, we hear voices and we're like, are we hallucinating? And I'm like, I don't feel that wasted. This isn't like that. Turns out that Tim Auger, who was a warden, we call park ranger, but they're different in Canada. He was a climbing ranger, had brought 6 other wardens up the Japanese route as a training exercise. And so we ended up, meeting almost at the summit, and then they knew the way down on the Japanese route.
Amazing.
And so we just, followed.
As someone who has been lost going down the Japanese route, having climbed the North Face.
Yes.
It's like, which of these, where do I?
Right, exactly. It is really
super tricky. And I mean, it was Vince and I, we did not do it right. I mean, we got down, but we did not do it right. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So, weirdest thing like, probably no one has met on like the peak probably hadn't been summited for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the same day, two parties meeting on the summit is like, so that's my Greek god story, right? Both nights, just the terrible thunderstorms and, absolute despair. We're going to give up. This is our third try. I'm never coming back here no matter what happens. And we get to climb it.
I've heard you say that alpinism creates environmental hubris. How did you put it? Alpinism creates environmental hubris and rock climbing creates human hubris. Is that how you said it?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe slight different phrase, but the difference between the two of those for me is that even when you're doing X rock climbing routes, like, so you could die, for those who don't know what X stands for, they probably have a different name for it now. But even when you're doing that or soloing, third classing, there isn't any other factors involved. And the alpinism, if you get the right set of circumstances and you get to the top of something, you definitely have a different gratitude for your hubris. Like, there's a way that you may feel like
humility.
You may feel like you're a great climber for getting up a hard alpine route, but you also know that it could have gone completely the other way. Whereas I feel like rock climbers oftentimes don't ever feel that way, and that they that there's a way that they get to think highly of themselves without having to be tempered by those other factors. And when you're doing the hard alpine routes, you're tempered. Every human that I know that was a good alpinist had a bunch of times when they went up strong, fit, motivated, spiritually ready, great partnerships, and just gotten their asses kicked.
Yeah.
And there's a little anecdote, or maybe even shorter than an anecdote. We were, I can't even remember what we were doing, but Mark and I just fucked up over and over again on this route, and we did not make it. And we're walking back to the car, and I cannot, I don't remember which one of us said it, but one of us looked at the other one and said, "How have we ever gotten up a hard route?" And because you have those days when, those Greek gods conspire against you. Mm. Sometimes they just like to see you suffer.
Yeah, maybe nobody was conspiring. There's unforced errors too, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So,
and maybe it was both of those.
What is if alpinism kind of gives you this humility and rock climbing sort of gives you this hubris, where does life fit into those models? Because we haven't talked about this. I mean, you're also the father of two amazing grown children, which, I mean, is that's the ultimate badge of honor as far as human achievement to me, is like that you raise kids and your kids are amazing. I mean, that's not, there's lots of ways to mess that up. And lots of people do, but your kids are both incredible humans. You're successfully retired. You had a great career. You built up your company the last 20, however long, I don't know, 20 years, and have just recently retired. Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
And I had to wait for you to retire and get your damn shoulder surgery before I could get you on here, but it was worth it. So, how do those lessons tie together with these other aspects of life where you've been so successful?
So here's what I'll say. There's a line from a old Somerset Maugham book called The Razor's Edge, where the line is, "It's easy to be a holy man in the mountain." And so, you get to be like a monk as an alpinist, and a lot of the training you do, if you're successful as an alpinist, is by yourself, because you need to have the training that you need to have, and groupthink isn't part of that. And right. Those who do groupthink are never, I shouldn't say never, but mostly never going to be as good an alpinist as those who are willing to go and do it by themselves, because they know what they need that day. And so I think that kind of monastic ideal, and then the fact that you really do get to be a holy man in the mountain, means that you have a place to start from in terms of some humility. And then I think that all the climbers that I know all the alpinists that I know have a really hard time when they're in their 30s, especially, bringing it to the city. And then they have another really hard time, like I did, when they quit alpinism, if they do. So those two periods of time, I think, are really critical in people that are alpinists, and that Mark won't care if I say this. Even someone like Mark becomes a humanist. And that's amazing transformation from, if you read his first articles that he wrote.
Right.
And he's kind and humanist, and he still does not suffer the fool gladly, right? Nor do I. And I think that kind of humility, and finding a way after being up high, down low, so that you can put some of those lessons into play, are really important for development of the rest of our lives. And I know that you've struggled, I know that with this exact same things. And I think that when I'm a great rock climber, the success that I would see in my life is, maybe a little bit more ruthless business person, and just like, I've seen so many big fish in small pond rock climbers, and I've never seen a big fish in a small pond alpinist. I guess is what I'll say about that. And there's lots of nice rock climbers.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we don't need to throw everybody under the bus here.
Not at all.
I want to go back to, because I love what you said, that it's easy to be a holy man in the mountains, and it gives us a place to start, because that totally rings true for me.
Yeah.
And then tell me about this transition in your 30s, and then I'll tell you something about mine.
Okay. Yeah. So when I started coming home, and before I quit, and for me, a big part of it was finally realizing that my dad was wrong. Like, it took me 10 years to like myself enough to be able to come back into the city and be a good, kind person. And
how was your dad wrong? What did he tell you that was wrong? I'm not going to let you off the hook.
No, and I don't want to. I'm not at all afraid of that. Like, that's like a big chunk of my life. So my dad was like a lot of greatest generation dads, and but he also was a narcissist, and so he was brilliant. He was a Shakespeare scholar, and he was really precise. And I was an ADD kid with a really big heart, and all he could see was my flaws. And he taught me in an immensely effective way to hate myself. And he hardly ever yelled. And he had been an actor. And so he had this voice, and his cold contempt for all the mistakes that I made me feel less than human. And so there's a baseline of self-hatred. And I often say that if I hadn't started smoking pot at 15, I would have killed myself in my teenage years, because I really hated myself that much. I remember one time walking by a plate glass in a mall and looking at myself, and I mean, I don't think I said it out loud, but I might as well have, looking at my reflection and saying, "You're hideous." And I didn't just mean my looks. I didn't mean, my physical representation, that too, but it was much deeper than that. And then I'll also say that one of the great things that happened, because my dad was a Shakespeare scholar, is that there was endless books.
Yeah.
And so I realized by the time I was 16, after reading the classics for 2 or 3 years, that they were all hypocrites, and that they were all fucking wrong. And
how are they wrong?
Just the whole middle class morality, and your word is your bond, and like I just saw how it wasn't that. The Nixon, Watergate, and the whole way that the older people reacted to the hippies and their hate for them, and those were the opposite things that they said that they lived by and espoused to. And so I just saw that way of living, of being two-faced like that, and I decided that would never be my path.
And how did that connect to this self-hatred that you carried around?
Yeah, so there was a way that I was able to say that I may hate myself, but they're wrong too. And there was also more than a ray. There was a bright sky that I found through reading the classics, and a way through life where I realized that I was right, and that those corporate fucks. There's a great line from a modern group, and it's actually a breakup song, but the first line of the song is one of my favorites, which is, "The businessmen drink my blood like the kids in art school said they would." And so I knew that from the age of 15, and I knew that all those people that pretended to be noble and but were mean to their kids, and the people that were religious that didn't live according to that. And my joke when people would be religious when I was in my 20s and try and convert me or something, I would say, "So you consider yourself a practicing Christian?" And they would say, "Of course." And I'd say, "Well, it sounds to me like you need a lot more fucking practice." And
what did you mean by that?
I mean that you aren't living the life that you're saying you are if you're trying to proselytize. Figure your own shit out first. And so I went on that journey from those books till today to find myself and to find out who I was. And climbing certainly helped, but the books helped, and some therapy helped, and getting sober helped, and that's something that I don't mind talking about either. I'm almost 25 years since I last had the pipe between my teeth, and as I never really liked drinking, so I'm grateful for that. Drinking just usually made me sick, and but smoking pot didn't. And I think of all the drugs that you could take 3 or 4 times a day, like I would do for not always, but because I would go on and off, right? But I feel like that was probably the least harmful thing that I could have done to myself.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that was the one that I preferred.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but not a lot of domestic violence is committed on marijuana. It's
for real.
Yeah. And so, that's, and I think that when you're ADD, that makes more sense, right? Because it defocuses you a little bit, which you probably needed a release from your own intensity. I mean, you're so intense that you could look into that plate glass window.
I mean, I guess I would ask you that question. Like, you knew me when I was a little bit older, but I don't think there was a single person that met me that wouldn't have said, Backy's, oh, fucking Backy's is super intense. I mean, is that or maybe not, I don't know.
I mean, we were all intense, mm-hmm. Right? I mean, you have to be intense. No, you have to be intense to like be even interested in these things, I think. Mm-hmm. For me, I think like that 30s struggle was, sort of trying to figure out how my climbing mattered. Like, I'd from a pretty early age been, since, I went to the Himalaya the first time when I was 19 years old.
Right.
And so I was on this track. I was completely bought in. And then after Nanga Parbat, I had to write this book, the Beyond the Mountain book. And the reason is because I thought I might not live very much longer. And that's the god-awful truth. That was one of my main motivations for I was like, I've got to do this because if I keep, I'm not dumb, right? Like, how many of us are left?
I'm laughing because it's true.
Yeah. Right? Of course, I know. Yeah. And it's also like kind of like sounds morbid and crazy and all these, like, why would you keep doing it then? Like, I mean, there's all kind of like any normal person and it's, because that was my purpose. That was what I was here to do. And that was what I was doing. And it was like and I really identify with your idea of, being a holy man in the mountains, because that's where I could go and I could really connect to that part, that holy part of myself, that part of myself that could be quiet, that part of myself that could live according to all the, morality and rules that you wanted to come up with without needing any of the morality and rules, because it was so stripped down that you don't need rules about, I don't know, not killing your neighbor or not coveting his wife, or I don't know, whatever rules there that people come up with, because it was just, me and a few friends and maybe a cook and some mountains, and that was it.
And sometimes just yourself, like both you and I have, and Mark, have had a number of days in the mountains by ourselves and big objectives.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you bigger than Mark or I, but still, for the time, the stuff that, I did when I was young and Mark did when he was young, those were,
Yeah. So what was your motivation for going soloing the mountains, do you think? And then I'm going to remind you of something you told me once, so be careful.
Good. I mean, when I look back on, when I would go solo in the mountains as opposed to rock climbing, because I did an
I'm specifically.
Well, partly it was because I felt like I had to. Like there was this part of me that, as part of my, and I hate to, use the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, but I love that model.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that for me was part of the deal, was that like, what is it like to be there by myself? And, what will I garner from those experiences? And then partly it was because I felt like it was badass to do that. And so there was a part of it that wasn't as pure as the other part, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think that people need to realize that are listening to this as younger climbers, that the culture of climbing has changed immensely, right? Like it used to be the thing to do.
Right.
And everybody did it to some level. And that was just part of the thing. Like you had certain days, and it didn't matter if you're, Ron Kalk or John Becker, of course, are, very famous for that. They're famous for all the hard protected ropes climb they did too. Peter Croft, all those guys did a ton of free soloing. And we did, and if you look at the history of alpinism, whether it's Walter Bonatti on the north face of the Matterhorn is his crowning achievement at age 40, and then he walked away from alpinism forever, or
Paul Preuss
Paul Preuss. Yeah, Paul Preuss is actually the best archetype of that.
Right?
Because he was so pure, he had to free climb up and down everything, and not even use a rope to descend.
Yeah.
So that, and be by himself. So that was almost the starting point. That was pre-World War I when
Preuss, we knew about that. You and I and those of our ilk knew about that shit in those days. The kids don't know what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. And so climbing now, with its culture coming mostly out of the climbing gym and social media and these other forces that shape our culture, it's not anchored to Paul Preuss. It's just not.
Right.
And so that was a big part of what we did. And so when I wanted to continue talking about my experience riding Beyond the Mountain, because one of the things that I really struggled with during those years was what you said, the city. And I was living in, outside of Bend, Oregon. And I set myself this schedule of writing a chapter a week for 12 weeks. And I had I would find myself some nights like 3 a.m, either like on my motorcycle on some dirt trail out in the middle of Central Oregon all by myself, just because I had to I just needed a way to get my mind straight again and didn't know what to do. Or I'd be at the topless bar down the road, right? And those were kind of and I really struggled with how to manage that, and in those environments, whether it's a bar and of course this is in Oregon, right? So all the bars in Oregon are basically strip clubs to some degree, or it's, which is true, more strip clubs per capita in Portland, Oregon than any other city in the world. And the reason that is relevant is that it's like this idea of temptation, of self-control, of boundaries, of what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, what do I allow myself to do, what do I not allow myself to do in the human environment. All of that stuff is kind of there all the time, whether it's on a billboard with a beautiful model smoking a cigarette. I guess they don't allow that anymore, or whether it's seeing some Red Bull stunt with a guy backflipping off a sand dune over whatever, there's just always these I don't, the word boundary isn't quite the right word. These lines that you have to decide whether you're going to cross or not. And in the mountains, when it's simple, you don't have any of those lines. It's just, and so that's what, and so I think that this is exactly what you were talking about and how I identified with that as a 35-year-old. And by the time, remember, I was 35, I was like, quote unquote, world famous, right? Like I was the big show. And so I had this, that kind of poisoned my expectations. Right. Yeah. Because, and you're part of it because of the nickname you gave me. And then I had to that messed with me too. And you owe me a popsicle or something for that too. But that was really
before hard. I knew you.
Okay. You got to tell the story now.
So before I knew you, and it was after the gathering, I think, right? No, it was a little after that.
It was later, I think.
Yeah, it was later. I think it was after you'd done the Fathers and Sons.
Could be,
I think that was the deal. And I can't even remember where we were, but, people were talking about some of the Polish and the Slovaks and the Russians and, the way that they were climbing in the Himalaya. Cool routes they did, but how they did them and how much, all of our ilk hated that. And then I, said, well, at least we have Steve House. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, dude, he's the great white hope for alpinism. And that's based off of a play that a very famous play and quite a great movie also about that, about a black boxer who gets destroyed because he wasn't supposed to be the best boxer, and they wanted a great white hope to. But in your case, I coined that phrase because, I mean, you guys used to talk about me being somewhat mystical, but like I saw your future more than I think anyone else at the time did. And then when you started living up to it, then it became your moniker. And that totally wasn't fair to you. And it was before I knew you as a human. I just knew what you did and knew what you were. Like, at least that part of you. You're like, I'm not saying that I knew, Steve
You
House.
saw that part of me. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I saw where it would go. And it felt to me like you weren't going to get killed.
And that's so interesting, because I think that this is something I talked to Greg Penner, the chairman of the board of Walmart, in a couple episodes ago. And he talked about how he's gotten to this point where he's done so many, he called it reps, I think, how he's just been through things. He's been through so many relationships with people in life that he could spot it really fast. Like he really has, he's like, I don't know, I can't remember how he explained it, but I think that this is sort of a thing that you were doing. You've seen a lot of climbers, what it takes, and then you see somebody kind of, and remember, in these days, it was Climbing Magazine, and it was like every month or every other month you'd read something. And when you started to see a pattern, it's like, oh, this guy's like every 2-3 months, he's doing another route, and they're always a little bigger. And then, you saw a pattern and you recognize it. And I think you're also responding to me being American and these other climbers being Polish and Russian and Slovenian.
Yeah, and not doing it right.
Yeah.
They weren't doing it right. They weren't at that time, they weren't doing it right. They did some great no oxygen, Himalayan climbing, the poles, especially Czechs, like those guys did some of that, but they didn't do the hard alpine stuff in the Himalaya in good style. And I hated that. And so, but I want to go back to the 30s, because there was something that I wonder about you, but that I know is a truth for me. And that's that when I would come back from trips, I would like, how can I have meaning in the city after being part of God, which is how it felt to me. Like, how can I be here in this mechanized hum when I actually got to be attached to a power greater than me? And, Mark used to call it the Alpine vacuum cleaner. And, if your heart was right, if you'd done the training, if your partnership was good, you start at the bottom and the Alpine vacuum cleaner pulls you to the fucking summit.
Yeah.
And then you come back and there's cars and electric bills and girlfriends, and it's shit. It all seems like shit compared to being, transcendent in the universe, I guess, is the best way that I can. So it was those two things for me. It was not only just the trying to take the lessons that I'd learned there in terms of what being a good human is, and what is important in the world, partnership, and doing things with good style, and trying to be the stronger person when the other person wasn't the stronger person, and all those lessons that we learned. But then, so that was one part, and trying to put that out into the world when I was in the city. But then the other part, especially the first couple of months when I was home, was this feeling of this shit's for plebiscites only. This ain't for me. And I'm a plebiscite.
Yeah. and I mean, we did feel superior.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and we weren't too shy about it either.
No.
And we made, and I think we left a lot of bad taste in a lot of people's mouths by that. And here's what I wish I could say to my 30 whatever year old self, especially I'm thinking especially about after the Slovak.
Yeah.
We could talk about that in a moment, but what I wish I could tell myself about that now is that that whole experience that you described as being transcendent and experiencing this feeling of connection to a higher power, being able to like summon the best in ourselves and in each other, and to become this kind of super organism and climb these mountains was incredible. And when I would come back to the, I don't want to call it real world because both are very real, but the home world, the home culture world, and be back in town, be back home, and be faced with the electric bills and the relationships and all those things. So what I wish I could tell myself is that part was just as important as the first part.
Yes.
Because at that time, I thought the only part that was important was the part that happened in the climbing, and I've somehow almost felt sorry for myself that I had to deal with these mundane things like electric bills and listening to people talk that I didn't really want to talk to. And I don't know, like I just had such a chip on my shoulder after those trips. And I wish somebody could have said like, hey, this part is just as important as the other part. And it's actually required that insight is required before you can integrate these experiences, all of these experiences together into a new you, which is really what we're after.
Yeah, I mean, it really was, and I also think that doing that period of that kind of in town arrogance and lack of understanding were an absolute requirement for me, and I wonder about you and about Mark to get to where we are today. Like I really feel like the intensity of those experiences were beyond sort of the realm of humanness in really like, you know, and to there isn't a way for our young minds to be able to understand that at that point. I just think that I could tell myself that at 30, but I don't know that I could have listened. And I had to, break some things first and be like, I don't like breaking shit anymore. I'm sick of breaking shit, and let's not break shit anymore. Let's find another way through this. And then the other piece for me that I consider once in a while, but maybe even especially more for you, is how grateful I am that we didn't live in Europe, because we'd be dead. Because we would have just kept climbing. They would have given us money to go climbing, and we wouldn't have had to deal with the electric bills. And we would have just kept doing it until we died. And,
would we though? Because I was very aware of that. Not that the like.
If it was just like your
I
job,
did have the opportunity to just climb all the time and didn't. And actually, this is partially related to the training, because I also realized like mentally and emotionally and spiritually, it took so much out of me to go that far out on my abilities spec curve.
Yeah, a month of ice cream and movies for me.
Yeah, then when I came back, like I needed like I could only do that a couple times a year. That's how I was. And I remember, having this conversation with Marco Prazel, and one year he did 3 Himalayan expeditions.
Yeah.
And that he was like, even he admitted that was too much. Like immediately, like while he was still on the 3rd expedition, he was like, "Oh, this was a mistake. Like I should not have tried to do so much. Like I can't. Like I just, And so you need this.
Maybe you're right.
You need this other time too. You know? Yeah.
But
I mean, that's why I had, and you've been like this too. I mean, that's why during that phase of my life, like I rode motorcycles a lot. I had a woodworking shop. I built I built a greenhouse. I started raising cattle. I mean, I like came up with hobbies because I'm and even today, it's like working on other completely non-climbing related things because, I'm Randy Levitt, and I talked about this because he's been a pilot now for about 10 years, and I'm close to being done with my pilot license if I ever finish it. And he was just talking about like he just needs that in his life. Like he
Mm-hmm.
needs something to study and learn. And you've done that with like whether it's mountain biking or tennis or trail running, but you've also
Gravel
done it
bikes, gravel racing. I did.
gravel
Yeah, yeah,
racing,
right.
or also with the arts.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things like I've really appreciated and been trying to really dig into living in Europe is, a few weeks ago, or maybe it was 2 months ago now, went to Paris and went to the Louvre. I mean, like I'd never done
Yeah.
that,
Right.
like, well, I want to like, and I really appreciate those things now. Been going to operas, been going to metal concerts, like all the things, just
Yeah.
because that is something about my soul that needs that too, and is
Those
super
things help
interesting.
me strive.
Mhm.
Like I think I was lucky because from a little kid, I had those influences in my life, and then especially teenager and in the 20s, those things that I would see, I understood. I think I told you that story about my friend's dad who built muscle cars, and I only knew him as a welder. He was a guy who taught me how to climb, and taught me how to train for climbing. Right, different guy than David Austin, Kurt Johnson, but his dad like built the cars that were on the cover of Hot Rod,
Wow.
and he only worked on Pontiacs. And I had this old Pontiac. He'd work on it for me basically for free because it was a Pontiac. And one
And
time,
it was like he could do it in his sleep because he was like, whatever.
yes. And so one time he needed my help because he was dropping the tranny and putting a new one in. And then I watched him that day, what he did. And he probably said 11 words to me in the entire 6 hours that he, dropped the old and put the new one in. But I remember him seemingly to me at the time throwing tools around the car. But now when I look back on it, he was, placing them. And he got on the creeper once he got the car up, and he never looked. He just would grab the tool and like this thing just happened, and it was like magic. And then it was done, and the car was back down on the ground, and I drove home and I felt so fucking weird. And the next day I was like hanging out. I might have even been like on a run or something because I used to have good, ruminative time there. Um, and I was like, he's an artist. And like
100%.
from then on, from like the age of 21, from or maybe 20, I was at that time, I realized every time I saw someone doing something like that, uh, that what they were doing, and it always inspired me and made me feel like I have this inside of me because I can see these others doing it. And for me, for so many years, it was climbing.
Mm. And
And
if you talk to a real car guy, a real mechanic, to them, those machines have souls and spirits,
yes,
right? They're
yes,
not just like, I don't know, an odometer number and a year and a make or whatever, however we reduce these things to. They're like,
right.
the car has a personality. It has like
Mhm.
it's a sentient being to them.
Yeah, yeah,
And they're tuned into that and they connect with that and they get that experience
right.
wrenching on cars that we get on big mountains.
And when I was in my 20s and I would go to the state fair and see the seed art, because that's a thing in Minnesota where they take corn and other seeds and make art out of it. And we would, usually we were high, but maybe even if it was one of my sober periods, we would revile that, make fun of it. Like, now when I go, I have this deep reverence
Mm,
when I see the seed art. And I think about that person and like, what they were experiencing while they were in their perfect bliss.
mm,
And one of my climbing, early on climbing friends, was ended up being one of the head engineers for Boeing,
mm,
making the planes. And he retired because he hated the shortcuts they had started taking whenever it was 15 years ago, and which now has caught up with them, right? But he
right.
saw it back then. But when he retired, he started doing beading, the tiny little glass beads, and he has these projects that take 2 years, and they're magnificent.
What are they? Give me a
They're
picture in
like
my mind.
pictures, yeah, pictures like he's a canoeist, so he'll have pictures of, I think he lives out east now, like in Chesapeake or that area. And so there are these beads, from like this big to like,
And they're
four
like
by
paintings, but with colored
no
beads
colored beads. Yeah. Like the
that are
Indians
that
did.
are like sort of
So
like
each
a
one of those,
mandala kind of, but with instead of sand, it's beads and they're colors.
yes.
Oh
And they
wow,
make pictures,
wow,
right? And it's so all I'm saying about that is that, um, I got lucky with Kurt Johnson's dad teaching me that without teaching me that back when I was 21.
right,
And it was exactly the opposite of what I was taught by my Shakespeare scholar dad.
hmm.
There was only fine art and it was only these four things, and modernist artists were shit and like that. And so, to have this other alternative reality given to me, like literally just given to me, changed my life.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And you saw this sort of hypocrisy of art is expression, but it can only follow these four sets of rules.
yes,
They're,
yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
And so, I love humanities. I still think that kind of art is amazing. Like you said, opera, classical music,
yeah,
fine art, but all the other things that people put the same kind of soul and intention into,
yeah,
and discipline
yeah.
into, uh, you know.
Yeah, I challenge anyone to watch a skilled orchestra live and not just feel like completely moved, right? It's just the human coordination and all the, you know, centuries of collective practice and everything that goes into being able to do something like that as a group of 50 or 80 people is it's just unbelievable, and it's the same feeling I get watching The Cure too. It's like what they're able to conjure out of thin air
Yes.
and create live in front of you. It is magic, and it's hard not to feel reverence for that. One of the topics that we've kind of been dancing around that I want to drill in on with you, because it's always kind of, I guess I've always wanted to ask you about this, is identity.
Mhm.
And, you were able to walk this line with your identity as a climber, but that wasn't ever all you were. And I felt like I often had to give up all other aspects of my identity because that's what the world wanted me to be. They didn't want me to be anything other than an alpinist. And I felt a lot of pressure with that. And one of the things that I went to Evergreen State College in Olympia, and those people who know it will know that it's a school known for having a lot of kind of hippies, let's say.
Hippies.
And one of the things I realized there, I had a roommate for several years of college, and he was a Republican. He wore a suit, like a sport coat at least, and a red tie and a white shirt to class. Everyone else is, including me, hair down to their shoulders, Birkenstocks, flip-flops, or if you had shoes at all. And I realized, like, this guy was the only actual rebel. Like, the rest of us were
Bitter.
all
Yeah.
saying the same thing. Yeah, my roommate, Chris. We're all saying the same thing. We're all thinking the same thing. And it became our identity. And if somebody else said it, like this groupthink would sort of take over, and all of a sudden everybody said it. And I watched that happen. And I always have struggled with this. Identity so often sort of becomes a surrender of ourselves.
Sure.
And it took me a long time after looking back. I did have a lot of hindsight before I started to see that. I mean, I felt it kind of in my gut, like, what is off?
Yeah.
Like with this is weird. Like he's the only one who's actually got anything independent of his own mind to say here. And everybody's, of course, completely against him.
Yeah.
but they're also professing to be super open-minded and liberal and open to everything. And I just found those, and I think we all experience that in some way. Like it could be totally different circumstances for somebody else. So where do you place, how did you manage your identity, both as a climber, but also as a husband, as a businessman? How did you do that? How did you have all these different identities?
I tried, I think that the older I got, the less of a chameleon I was, because I wanted people to like me because I didn't like myself. And then I started liking myself in my 30s, and then I didn't need that anymore.
Yeah.
Like literally, I will say that was part of my journey, right? For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But even in my 20s, especially when that summer in 1980, I brought a ghetto blaster, little one, with me in 40, 50 cassettes. And when I was hanging out in the Rockies campground with Dave Myers, the guy who I did Temple with, there were 6 of his friends, and they were evergreenites, right? And I listened to jazz and classical. I didn't have a huge amount of cassettes for that, but I had Miles Davis Blue and Keith Jarrett clone concerts and Beethoven's Seventh, which is at the time was one of my favorites, and something else, one of the concertos. And every time I would turn that on, those guys would all be like, "Turn that shit off." They wanted to listen to all the punk rock and Roxy music and Brian Eno and all those cool cassettes that I had.
Mm.
And I'm like, fuck that. Like, I don't have to just be a punk rocker. I'm a fucking punk rocker. Look at my cassettes. Like, I don't have to get a haircut to be a punk rocker. I'm not going to get a mohawk. I'm not going to dress a certain way other than maybe black t-shirts because it's simple. But that isn't, I don't want to be one-dimensional. Like, I want to listen to the music that I want to listen to, and I don't give a fuck if you don't like jazz or classical music, because I do. And guess whose ghetto blaster it is? Mine. Did you bring one? No, you did not. So fuck off. And I always had that ability to, like, if my mind told me that it was the right answer, I tried to listen to that. And so, as a parent, I had a really terrible instruction manual from my parents. And, my mom was prescription pill and was sick from when I was 4 years old to when she died when I was 22, at least a couple of months a year. And I don't think, I guess I'm just going to say this out loud, came from a family of sexual abuse, which didn't happen in my family, thank God. Like both she and my dad had weird things like that. My dad was covert and she was overt, and all her sisters and maybe her brothers. Anyway, so I didn't have an instruction manual for my kids, so I made a lot of errors. But I also had this way that having my own personality really helped me as a father. So, like, one of the things that I believed was that my parents said no to me all the time, and I just did whatever the fuck I wanted. Because if all they say is no, and I'm independent, I'll take the consequences. I'm just going to do what I want, because there isn't any right answer, and they're going to hate on me no matter what I do. So with my kids, I really worked with them to say, I can't say yes to this. You have to change the question. Or to tell them, like, this is my least favorite part of being a parent. I hate this. I hate doing this. Come up with another alternative for me, because I don't want to be, saying no to you. And their parents drink. I can't let you stay over overnight. If you want to be there till 9, I'll pick you up. She can always stay over here. If you want to stay with your third friend whose parents I know are cool, we can do that. But I can't say yes to this thing. And I think with both my kids, that was really helpful. Because it was a way that I saw the world that I wasn't going to go either extreme with. Like, I wasn't going to be the super fun dad. And I wasn't going to be what my parents were, And so, and then I think the being in the film business, when for the 15 years that I did that work, whether it was, lighting technician or when I was rigging or when I was shooting adventure film, there's a way that you have to, after a while, at least know where your strengths and weaknesses are. And so, trying to do the thing that you're not good at isn't going to help the group. It's like I was never good at really technical dolly pushing. Like I could push the dolly at the right speed, but part of the deal is lifting and lowering the pedestal with the camera on it at certain marks at certain spots so that they could have the camera in the perfect spot for them to be able to do that. And I was never that great at that. I was okay. I got better, but like I was always like, no, maybe what I need to do is be the best boy, where I'm making sure that we have every single thing that we need. Or maybe I need to be the pre-rigger who comes in and does all the rigging work at, up in the catwalk, or even in the steel. And so I think there's a way that I learned from film and from climbing that I don't care what you want. This is what you actually have. And I, so if the pitch is breaking trail in, deep snow, Mark's doing those two pitches. And if the pitch is, really hard mixed climbing and you're not there, that's my job. Like I was better at Mark than that. And so it's cool to want to be things, but if you really want to be successful and have the people that you're with be successful, you have to know what that is. And I think that goes along with the same kind of thing of saying, I don't give a shit if you don't like, classical music. I'm not gonna go along with you and be like, fuck all other music because punk rock, right? I don't care about that. That isn't important to me. And because I didn't have the kind of cadre that you guys did living out west, I wasn't subject to that as much. So it was easier for me to develop that way because I wasn't part of it.
That's a great point. And I think that, for example, whenever I'm in Chamonix, which isn't very often, and part of the reason it's not very often is because it's like there's too much energy there for me and too much loss and lots of other things, lots of trauma related experiences there. But it's also like, even I remember being there. I remember one day, when was this? It was before my accident. I think it was 2009, and Uli Steck and I were climbing together, and we were just going, and it was kind of bad conditions. It was good skiing, and we did some, it was kind of one of those scenes. And we'd like go down afterwards. It'd be 3 or 4 o'clock, and we'd want to go to the, to the bar and have a, for him it was a coffee. For me it was a beer. And like, there'd be literally paparazzi, and I was just like, wow, like I don't appreciate this. Like, I just want to sit here and talk to my friend, like, about things that I talk with my friends about. And it can be okay if we're not planning the next great, like, climb that we're thinking about doing or attempting to do. We could just also talk about, I don't know, politics or an ex-girlfriend or some other mutual friend,
maybe
and what they're
even a
doing,
little bit of boy gossip,
or just some boy gossip or music, or like, a book we're reading, or a million other. I mean, Uli and I had lots of amazing conversations that were also philosophical and, about sports and training and all kinds of different topics. And you couldn't, it didn't feel like that was allowed. Because everybody had to know, what did you do? What did you just do? Because we must have done something amazing, right? Because we're House and Uli's deck. And what are you doing tomorrow? And it was just like, it's really exhausting, right? Like, it's really tiring. And so I understand. And one of the things I want to tell you this, that I think one of your superpowers as a friend, and I consider you a truly great friend of mine, is that because you bring that self-love and you are able to, as you just said a minute ago, if your heart tells you something, you're willing to speak it. And a lot of people aren't. But when people, as a rule, I think, are hesitant, myself included, to always do that because we're afraid of being judged or being ostracized or included in a group that maybe we don't think we belong with or whatever the thing is. But being around you, I always feel more empowered to just be me. And that's a pretty cool superpower that I think you have as a friend, is you empower your friends to be more of their true selves just by being you. Not It's no trick, it's no wand, it's nothing you do. You just be Scott, and you have your, and you tell your stories, and you say what's on your mind, and you have your opinion, and you maybe change it. All those things that you do, just being you, it's incredibly uplifting for me. That's my experience of you. So just thank you for that. That's amazing.
I'm going to say that's one of the sweetest compliments I've ever had in my life. Oh. Thank you.
You're welcome. And another thing that you've done is you are the first man that wasn't my father who ever told me that you love me. And you don't say it just sometimes. You say it all the time. And you, I think, it's a perfect example of this, because I think we're all thinking it, right? It's part of, we haven't talked about this idea of the brotherhood, as you called it, and in alpinism, and how we had these there's other more derisive terms that people would use. Like we had these
great. Good for them.
Yeah.
I'm for it though. You know that, right?
Yeah, completely. And that's a perfect example where you just said it. And it was almost like, to hear that, it was such a relief. Like, oh man, I thought I was the only one. Right. And you're like, man, I know I feel this love for these guys. And to have you just tell me that you love me, I was like, oh, thank God, because I love you too. And to have that be normalized within our peer group was something that was pretty amazing. It really helped me a lot in understanding that I have a lot of value as a human, even if it's only to a few people. That's enough for me. It doesn't have to be to the whole world. It just has to be, like you said, to a few people that I actually care about.
Yes. So I was talking with Mark Twite, when I was out there, and a year and a half ago, a year ago or so. And I said, when I look back on my climbing career, I believe that the most important thing that I did for climbing was to bring the word love. And so when you just spoke that, that is exactly what I believe my value in the climbing community was. And I think that the kids that, like Kyle Dempster had this article at one time about, kind of thinking that the brotherhood was all serious, because he didn't know us. Mm-hmm. And he didn't know how, I gave birth to a 2-pound guaranteed outcome climber. And we don't have to go into anything other than that, but I feel like they get that because it came down through us, even though they don't know it. Does that make sense? I think some of those guys really
became normalized.
Yes.
In culture.
Yes. In that culture, in that small chunk of culture, it became normalized to have those feelings and say those feelings. Mm. And, someone as taciturn as like Conrad, when I would say that to him, and kind of watch him melt a little bit.
Yeah.
And, that to me, I said that because I felt like it was super, super important to have that be part of a normalized relationship with these people that I loved like so deeply, and I know you've heard me say this before, but my deal when I was climbing, when I wasn't climbing by myself, was that I couldn't let my partners down.
Hmm.
And those pitches that I led in the mountains that were, for sure life threatening, I did those because I couldn't let you down. I couldn't let Mark down. I couldn't let Bill Bancroft down. I couldn't let JoJo down. I couldn't let Bruce Hendricks down. I couldn't let those people down.
Has it become about other values now? Has it become about money or status or awards?
What it became about for 20 years was, and this was hard for me, and I know that how do I put this exactly? I chose to walk on some of my values to be able to have a financially verdant reality for my kids. And so, I started the business, became really successful at a business that, if done in the normal way, I find really distasteful. But the way that I did it was I had to figure out a different way to do it. And so,
what did you do?
So what I did was looked never at the short term and always looked at building relationships by helping people. And God, I just hate even saying this, but most of the time when I was in a room with a dealer, I was the smartest guy in the room. And I have a really great mind for big picture. I have a really unique math trick where I can do large sums in my head. And I'm a humanist. And so I was able to take those three things and come up with ways for businesses to be more effective. So these dealers that, started their business in the 1980s and barely had a computer, we came in and gave them numbers and told them exactly when to order, what to order, how to order, why to order. And we would come in and help them set up shooting videos, right when that first started, so that they would have an online presence that would drive people to their store and make them really successful. And for one example, I probably shouldn't say their name out loud, but I'm going to. Bartlett Manufacturing is in Marlette, Michigan. And when I took over that company, it had $12,000 in sales a year in Petzl. And when I left, it was $650,000 to $800,000 a year. And part of it was that I sat down with the owner and said, I have a little bit of money, and this company just went out of business or was bought by another company. And the reason that they were successful was videos. And I want you guys to start making videos. And they did. They hired a really handsome young Mexican American who spoke 2 languages. And so every time he made a arborist video, it was dual, English and then Spanish, or Spanish and then English. And I'm just saying that because being a reptile wasn't in my blood. I tried to do that with Black Diamond and I hated it. But when I started doing it for myself and as my own company, I was able to do it in a way that still felt ethical. And I did a shit ton of demos and workshops and training, which a lot of agencies didn't do. So I guess what I'm saying is that I was the businessman that was drinking your blood, like the kids in art school said they would. And in a way, I made an immense amount of money over a 20-year period so that I could, put my kids through college so that they didn't have any debt, and have a, good retirement egg, and have a house that's paid off. And, I did that by being smart, but I also paid my employees really well and gave them absolute freedom.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I used the principles that I learned as an alpinist and as an artist to do it in a way that, I could do it so that it didn't destroy my soul completely. And every night in a hotel room after 10 years was pretty much terrible. And I did it for my kids and for my future.
that you're living now, that you're retired.
That I'm living now.
Yeah. And for a long time to come, right? Like,
and for a long time to come.
Yeah.
And 20 years isn't much to give the world, to let the world have their hands on you. That's how I would put it, is that, by the way, that's my, how it feels to me is like, people coming over and just being able to put their hands on me. That's the spiritual feeling that it is to, work in business for me.
Just trying to think how to pull these things together, because I think that they're, the one thing that I'm aware of with this season of Voice of the Mountains is that I'm cherry picking, right? Like, you've been successful. Randy Levitt was successful. Greg Penner was successful.
Right.
Peter Metcalf was successful. And I'm not talking to any of the people that tried really hard and weren't successful. In many cases could be just because the gods felt like screwing with them, right?
Yep.
And it was nothing about their aptitude or their personalities or their intelligence or their time or their place or their resources or their connections. It was just the Greek gods.
Can I go back to Greek gods then?
Yeah.
So going back to the hero's journey, if you look at almost all of the mythic Greek heroes, they all had shit second acts. I mean, Oedipus pulled his eyes out. Jason was poisoned by his wife. Heracles was poisoned by his wife. Theseus ended up dissolute and absolutely unhappy in Thrace. And if you get to do what we did, if you get to do the hero's journey, out of every successful second act, there's 8 or 9 that aren't, because it's really, really hard to come back from that and to find a way in the city that makes sense, that has some resonance, that doesn't make you just want to drink the rest of your life away or whatever, dissolute in some way. And so I think that innately, what we did set us up for failure in our 40s and 50s, because what's ever going to compare to that? Yeah. And I think that we have to find out what it is that compares to that. And I'm going to say that having kids isn't that, but it can be. Like, there's no guarantee that having kids is going to, bring you joy and it's going to help you transcend, that sorrow and grief that we all feel, leaving behind something so magical and there isn't words for it. Like, what it really is, there aren't any words to describe what it really is that you leave behind.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I really love my kids, and I wanted to make that true. And for me, I loved winter climbing still. And so for the past 20 years, I've worked really hard at winter climbing and kept my skills to a level that, what I've done in the past 20 years is nothing short of extraordinary for someone my age. I don't mean to toot my horn, but you were there for, when I was 50, whatever it was, 54 at Ouray and took 6th place. I mean, that kept my interest, but I could do it in a way that I knew I would come home to my kids. And I tried not to do any of the X routes anymore. Yeah. But like I said, this winter I did that one, and it's like, that was fucked. That was bullshit. I really believe I'm never going to do that again.
I have had that experience, with my climbing last years where, obviously I've dialed it way down, but even then, with the little climbing I've done, especially when I'm out and I'm taking care of someone, whether it's my wife or my kids or whatever, and I'm up and I'm just I know, it's like I know too much. I know all the things that could go wrong. I know all the things that could go right, and then usually do, but I also know all the things that could go wrong. And just like, I just get up there and I'm like, it's not worth it. Like, I don't want to deal. Like, I don't want to be in those situations anymore.
Yeah. And we diverged on that for sure, because, like I said, big roots in Norway, and, going to Icefall Brook, and the big trips in Quebec on, those are, serious. For many people, they would be the culmination of a career, I guess,
Yeah. Those are big, hard, remote ice climbs and mixed climbs. Right. I mean, ice climbs don't get bigger than those, honestly. Right. I mean, they just don't. So, I mean, that's the pinnacle of the sport. And you've always been great at ice climbing and mixed climbing. That's always been something you've been really good at. So, there's part of me that is jealous of you. And there's also, like, I've also, tried and gone out and been like, meh.
Right.
I did have a lot of fun one time a couple of years ago, going out, and like, it was a route that had only been climbed once, and a local guide, and I just had to follow.
Yeah.
That was actually fun. I liked that. I like to be guided up. It was like zero risk, but I still got to have all the fun of the climbing. And it was a safe day and all the other things. But so how do you, I think it's so interesting, this whole, this whole idea that we kind of started with was, I mean, that you hated yourself, and that you had to find a way to love yourself, to respect yourself, to care about yourself, to think that you have something to contribute, to think that you have a future, to think that before you even can get to, like, a purpose, right? Like, a lot of times people just jump straight to the purpose, and I'm like, well, do you even like yourself? You have to like yourself first. Then you can work on those things. But, and then going from that, and then, the reason that you recognized that the way to build a good business was to help people first, and to take that long-term viewpoint, is that because you learned that already the hard way in working on yourself, because that had taken 20 plus years.
20 plus years.
Yeah. And I mean, and present continuous, right? It's never really, we're all works in progress, right? But that is going to continue. And one of the things that I think about, and I was just telling you before we started recording, how I went this last weekend. I went to the American Alpine Club annual dinner, and even though there were small interactions, just like keeping those little sparks of relationships alive with friends that I've known for 20, 30 years, I just, it's like, that's where I'm, like, mining now for that inspiration, and connecting with you through the, this project, which is entirely a selfish project of my own sort of creative interest, and also somehow I'm hoping that by talking to you and all these other people that have been through this, that we can maybe look back all of it and come up with some threads and say, like, okay, these are some themes that went through all of these conversations. These are some lessons that we can all become a little more aware of. That's my hope. And you've certainly contributed so much to our community in bringing the love, and just, I think.
And for me, the other thing that I brought was levity. Like, I was always able to have humor no matter how bad things were. And because to me, that love that I felt for my partners, and I hope this doesn't sound too weird, but that love that I felt for my partners allowed the inner child that got so beat up when I was a kid to feel safe.
Yeah.
So even when I was in a place that physically wasn't safe, on a tiny ledge in a bibbler tent, whatever it was, I felt safe spiritually with the people that I loved. And because I felt safe, my inner kid always liked having fun and laughing. And so I really believe that that was a huge part of how I was able to uh, be a good team member in any group that I was climbing in, was
Yeah,
because
I mean, and
I
this
felt safe
is,
with you guys.
I mean, I'm no developmental psychologist, but you know, first you have to love your parents and have a secure connection, then come your friends, and then comes you. I think that's
Yeah,
kind of the way it works,
right.
at least in my experience. And so being able to do that and like pay it forward, pay it backwards, however you want to look at it, pay it forwards to your own kids and to me and the rest of the community has been amazing.
Yeah, and like I said, it doesn't happen unless unless I feel safe. And I think that as another last little piece for me, now that we're talking, is that is part of why I kept my group so small. Is because my experiences in Yosemite and in Boulder were like, I don't want to give my heart to these people. These people are going to trash me, just like happened, to me when I was in junior high, and just like happened to me with my parents. And I want to have community with these fewer people where I can feel safe and I can feel love, so that that kid can come out and have a really great time, even in terrible circumstances.
Mm.
And I think being in the small arena, like no arena, because I mostly climbed by myself, right? And certainly did all my training by myself. And so there was this way that I had these, 10, 15 friends that I could trust. And I wasn't interested in anything other than that. And I think most people are willing to compromise because they think they're supposed to.
And I think that this is where I feel like it's become too much about status and money and
You think?
Instagram likes, and because that's an external validation. Like the first thing you're talking about is also a form of external validation. It's the validation of your friends.
Yep. Yeah.
On the next level of that is feeling safe with them. And that used to be all there was. And at some point, and I just didn't figure it out yet, first of all, if this is true, and second of all, if there is a tipping point there where, as a culture, and at least climbing has shifted too far to being about likes and money and status and fame, and we're not about respect and these original kind of virtues that we aspire to. Because the way I grew up with alpinism, especially after I'd been in Slovenia, was like the ultimate thing was to go off and do the hardest route in the world with one other person and come back and tell no one.
Yeah.
That was perfection. That's what everybody was like.
Right.
And like that's not part of the conversation. That's not the zeitgeist now. And so I don't know how we get back there. I don't know if we should either. I mean, who am I to put my values on the younger generation?
The kids that both sets that did the Slovak, and their kids meaning their 30s, like we were, right?
Yeah. Rob Smith and Michael Gardner.
Yeah, all those guys, right? Yeah. And I've met a couple of them, and I feel like they know they have to do a minimum of that. Does that make sense? But that isn't their main thing. But I think that they're in the vast minority.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you're right. I think I'm probably unfairly judging them, and I'm casting the net too wide. I mean,
and I think that if Balin had lived and had gotten to hang out with, because I think Mark would have hung out with them, and hung out with Mark more, I think he would have found something different. And because Mark wouldn't have hung out with him if he didn't have heart. right? Mark would have just been like, I mean,
He would have seen right through that. But
of
if
the
you didn't have
ultimate
heart, you wouldn't
dismissive.
be soloing those routes.
Yes, right. Yeah, right. And the ultimate dismissive human is Mark Twight. So, if he's going to hang with you, you may not be, evolved fully, but he sees some potential in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I felt sad about that. That whole thing, was like something out of a dystopian future.
Yeah. And for the audience that doesn't know, Balin Miller was an incredible young climber who soloed a route that had never been repeated that Mark Twight and Randy Ratcliffe did. And what year was that? 88?
Yeah, 88.
And then went on to do a bunch of other incredible climbs. And he rappelled off the end of his rope trying to free a jammed piece of gear on the top of El Cap, and it was sort of live streamed on the internet because people had the lens on him when he was doing that, and he fell to his death.
I think he was doing it too, though. I think he was live streaming.
Oh, he was too?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yeah, that's, I mean, when I couldn't, I made sure I didn't see that.
Me neither.
Because I just didn't, I couldn't have that mark on my soul. It just,
no.
So tragic.
You and I have both seen mayhem, and I when I stumble upon it and I can be of help, I'm more than happy to do that. And I hated it every time that I had to, help some injured climber. Like, it was always shit for me. And certainly the recoveries that Mark and I had to do when we were on patrol, it's awful. And I don't want to share that with anyone or have that be part of the dialogue about anything other than to say, it's cool to, die climbing. Everyone dies. But it's better if you live. Yeah. And, climbing's worth it if you live. And maybe it's worth it if you die too. How would I know? It hasn't been my experience, and we can't talk to those who died climbing. But, when it happened, it was the first time I ever thought to myself, this is shit. Fuck climbing. I hate it. I really felt that for like half a day. And then I was like, oh my God, Scott, are you kidding me? Your time with Mark, your time with Bill Bancroft, your time with JoJo, your time with Steve, your time with all these friends that you had and all those amazing things. No, fuck that. That's not true. And then I was like, yeah, it's all cool if you live. So,
yeah, that's what, Barry and I were talking about this a few years ago and saying, like, success is dying of old age in bed, surrounded by your family and loved ones,
as an alpinist, yeah.
As an alpinist, yeah.
Yeah, as an alpinist, that is definitely the,
Yeah. What would you tell the 20-year-old Scott if you were here?
I would say that the path that you're on isn't knowable, and it's worth staying on. And the lessons that you are going to learn are going to be so long and hard fought that if you knew about them now, you wouldn't go on. And the desserts are going to be so rich that you can't imagine it now. And I would say that every chance you get to be kind to someone and to tell someone that you care about them or that you love them, take the time to do that.
The old adage that I asked God for wisdom and he gave me problems to solve.
I have this thing that I like to say, which is, I've never heard someone that's 80 years old say that they wish they traveled less, wish they spent less time with their kids, wish that they had less sex, or wish they hadn't been as kind. Never heard an 80-year-old person say that. So I think that we can be safe in assuming that those things are all,
wish they'd planted less trees, proverbially, and
yes, right, yes, all of that.
All of that, yeah. Well, thank you, Scott. It's been incredible as always. You've just been such a good friend and such a the best friends are also our mentors, and you've certainly been that for me. I've learned so much from you, not the least of which that it's okay to express my love for my friends, and just as I do for my family, and and how these relationships that we built through shared struggle. I mean, here we talked for over 2 hours, and we didn't really talk about climbing very much at all. We certainly didn't at least talk about any of the climbing that we did together. I mean, maybe that's another conversation for another time. If anyone, and no one's probably interested in it except us. And that's why we have this relationship.
Yeah. And I know that it may not have seemed so at the time, but you were definitely a mentor to me. And the same way that Mark was. And you guys were not just my friends, but watching you particularly strive was, and I always take it out of the climbing arena, just like that passion to strive that you have was always incredibly inspiring to me. And so, I really appreciate that. And the fact that you were willing to hang with both Mark and I, who are, we're so insular as friends that breaking into that trio isn't easy for anyone. And you did it seamlessly. So thank you.
I was able to let you be you. And I was able to, you guys didn't feel threatened by me, neither of you, right? Nor did your friendship feel threatened by my friendship with you, my friendship with, right. And we were all, I think that was a big part of it. I do have to do this one thing that. So on the Slovak, after the repentance remission pitches, and we did this little, we followed the original. We're the only ones to have actually followed the original route on the Slovak Direct. Everyone else did the Mahoney variation that Kevin and Ben pioneered straight off of the top of that first repentance remission ice strip. And we did a little rappel kind of
two diagonal rappels.
Yeah. And then you had to help Mark because, you and I had done some Yosemite big wall climbing. Right. We knew how to do that. He had no idea you were down there. But then remember that pitch off of the ledge that I led?
Yeah.
And there's a picture that Mark took. I'll have to put it in the show notes. I think Mark took it. I think Mark, did you have a camera? I can't remember.
Yeah. Oh, I took a bunch of pictures. Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't remember who took it. Because it's all in one folder now. I don't know who took what. But that moment, like that climb, remember I was like, we're on this granite ramp and there was this little overhang. It wasn't huge, but it was, maybe chest high, and had to get up and get into these kind of flaring cracks. And it was dark. It was, as it gets in Alaska, it was middle of the night. It was cold. We'd been climbing for a while, and I especially was like, something, that moment for me just carries this immense weight in if I weigh all the moments of my life, that moment has a lot more mass than almost any other moment. And the reason is because I climbed up through this little roof, and I finally got the first real piece of gear in above us, and I just remember looking at you, and I think that's when the picture was taken, because there's this picture in my mind, but I don't know what's my memory anymore and what's the picture, because it was so long ago. But there was just this like real feeling that for me that we were all somehow one. And that sounds crazy. It sounds, and I experienced it. I can't even really describe it, and I felt like this immense responsibility, because rightly or wrongly, I thought that I was the only one that could lead that pitch, and I was the only one, and that we had to climb that to survive.
Yeah.
And
it was right before we got to that ice field.
Yeah.
Where we got,
we
right?
got lost.
Yeah.
Another story. But like, it was the pitch getting up to that ice field. And it got easier as I got into it, but it was quite hard there for the first, 40 or 50 feet off of the belay. And my feet cut out at one point, and I kind of caught myself. That. Yeah, we all remember that. It's more than just a moment. It was, half an hour or an hour. I have no idea how much time went on. But that experience, particularly that little bit of climbing, of all the climbing on that 8,000 foot pace or whatever it is, that 25 meters of climbing really profoundly changed me and how I felt about other people. And because for the first time, I felt really connected to other people in a profound way that I would just describe as almost like religious or mystical or something. And I'd never felt that before.
So that's, I think, what I was trying to say to you when I said, I always felt like I had to do the pitch because I had to uphold for my partners.
Yeah.
Because I felt like there was this connection and sacredness that, like I couldn't, it wasn't about right or wrong, or it was about the partnership. And I know that you felt that, at that pitch, because that was the spiritual and physical crux of the route for us. And, if I had done it, which I would have gone in the groove to the left, that weird chimney ice thing. And I felt like I could climb that. But the way you took it, where you went straight, do you remember that to the left? There was like a groove. I felt like I could have gotten into that groove and like chimney climbed it. But there's another piece that I want you to know, which I don't know if you know this, but Mark does. I was in AFib.
Yeah.
So when I finally realized that I had AFib, yeah. And so like that sleep that we did at 16.4 knocked the AFib out. And I believe I still would have made it, but I wouldn't have been able to keep up with you guys. And I would have told you to keep going. I wouldn't have made you wait.
We wouldn't have waited.
Yeah.
Or wouldn't have not waited.
I know. But so that for me, my remembrance of that is in a way being up there with you. Does that make sense?
I felt that you were up there with me. I mean, both of you.
Yeah.
That was an amazing experience. And we still fell into the trap of trying to describe it with numbers and words and pictures.
And nothing wrong with that, because there's a way that doing our very best is good effort.
Yeah. 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And each one of us wrote about it really differently.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. Like, the pieces that were important to us and whatever, and so, it's a cool thing to have those three, each of us in a different, venue, writing our version of what happened up there. And I like Mark's statement that it was a really hard route to live with. So.
Yeah, but that was the coming back to reality piece.
Yeah.
What was a scene from the movie about the Iraq War where the guy comes back from deployment and he's in the cereal aisle?
Yes.
What was that film?
Was it Hurt Locker?
Hurt Locker could have been.
Yeah.
And there's just that's the experience.
Right.
Right? Like he's been in this super intense life or death, super focused, brotherhood, responsibility, love, all of those
touching
things.
God,
touching God.
Yeah, right.
And, hey, we're out of Cheerios. And
you know what moment it was for me? It was just after that, there's a moment that the two of us were on that, like 2 pitches up that ice face, and we were hanging off one screw, and you had one tool, and we were leaning into each other while Mark was climbing, and I don't remember if I was belaying or you were belaying, but we were both, and it felt like there was one person there.
Yeah.
Like the way that I don't know how to describe it, but I just remember hanging off our tethers. I remember we, had our daisy chains or whatever they were, passes, whatever they were, hanging off of that single screw while Mark was up there, and the two of us in this circle of black ice with a tiny little whatever strength we had to be able to, titch a little crampon place for one of our feet, but just leaning and like being one person while we were hanging up those tethers. Yeah, I know you remember that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was like a prolonged hug.
Yeah.
That's how I remember it.
Yeah. But right, like we're just and I feel that at that point, it was before we got lost, of course, but I remember feeling super calm at that moment with you. Just like the two of us there, and like this is where we're supposed to be, and this is what's happening right now, and I don't need it to be any different than it is right now.
What is it about, and I'm going to say men, though it's not always men, that they have to be put themselves in these extreme positions to access that?
So my belief is genetics and the short history of humankind. So
we're still buffalo hunters.
We're still with sharp sticks poking mastodons to get them to run off the cliffs, and that's our job. And guys die all the time doing that.
Yeah.
And the job of women in those times was to cooperate.
Yeah.
And to care for the young ones and to love each other, because even if they had fights, they still had to cooperate to find the berries and seeds. Mm-hmm. And when someone was sick or when someone wasn't producing milk and you were, your job was to, nurse the baby.
Yeah.
And there's just like this way of cooperation. Men cooperate, but they do it in this way where it's martial. And I think that that was 32,000 years ago.
Yeah. It's
right.
Not very long ago, really.
That's if we think about the history of the earth, like that's a day, that's an hour, that's a minute, a second, whatever. And so I think that having to go to those extreme places gives us the excuse we need to let go of societal bounds and to transcend genetics, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't think the Industrial Revolution did us any favors. Mm. I mean, in terms of like, what men are to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been an honor.
Well, I'm going to say it differently. I'm going to say, what a sweet conversation to have with my friend Steve.
Last question. I may ask this to everyone. How does Scott Backes want to be remembered?
In the climbing community, I would want to be remembered as the one who brought the word love to the hard-ass alpinists. And in the other communities, I would want to be remembered as the imperfect person who tried to understand himself.
Yeah, and I think you can take some credit for your amazing kids too.
Yeah.
That's a big contribution.
Yeah, they get to, their deal is their deal. I will say that one of the best things that as a parent, I believe can happen to you is that when your kids are over 21, they still say, I love you and still want to hang out with you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, the only real test that matters is getting what you want to have out of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel, as I'm sure you do, incredibly grateful for the path that who would have ever thought for either of us in a way, right? It seems impossible.
Yeah. Here we are. Thanks so much, Scott.
I love you, Steve.
I love you, Scott. One of the most common questions I get is, how should I get started with training? Well, they say the first step is the hardest, so let's make that easy. We are offering free 4-week samples of our most popular training plans for mountaineering, trail running, climbing, and more. Go to uphillathlete.com/letsgo to sign up for our newsletter, and you will not only get monthly insights on training for uphill athletes, but you'll also get a sample training plan. It's totally free, so why wait? That's uphillathlete.com/LETSGO.